All right, everybody. Um, you just finished a little exercise on the Declaration of Independence, learning about that. Again, for the most part, this all should be reviewed, guys. There shouldn't be anything that's groundbreaking. You should have learned about this when you were in junior high. But mostly this focus is going to be on really the Enlightenment and kind of dissecting more into the actual Declaration, actually reading the primary source. So again, kind of just you see on the screen here a couple quotes I took from this. The whole point of that was kind of seeing, what Enlightenment thinkers did you see that really kind of, as you were reading the Declaration of Independence, what phrases were like the aha moments for you? Like, that sounds a lot like this Enlightenment thinker, or this looks a lot like that Enlightenment thinker. And the whole point of this little unit is really showcasing the importance of the Enlightenment and how you'll see those things played off in a lot of these early American documents that will inspire the colonists to fight for independence, and then you'll see a lot of those concepts within our new government that we still hold so dearly to our heart. So again, as you'll see here, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. That should be John Locke. Life, liberty. No, he says property, but very similar pursuit of happiness. So all men have unalienable rights or inalienable rights. Um, so that should be boom. That's a John Locke concept. That's enlightenment. You see that basically almost verbatim from what he said to as written directly in the Declaration. How about this one? But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such governments and to provide new guards for their future security. So a long train of abuses. So what's he saying here? But when a long train of abuses, well, by who? Who's he talking about? Well, this whole document is about the King of England, Great Britain, the long train of abuses of what they've been doing to the colonists. Think back to what you guys did in the lecture on Monday. Those long abuses are, the Stamp Act, the Intolerable Act, the Tea Act, all these things that have happened for decades under the rule of the king on the colonists, where they had no representation in the British government. So with these long-term abuses, I'm going to skip a little bit, it is their right, our right as colonists, it is their duty to overthrow that government. That if the government is not protecting the natural rights of the people have the right to overthrow. That should sound very familiar to you guys from your notes from Monday. Social contract. That the people, colonists, give our rights, provide, kind of give we give up some of our rights to the king in exchange for protection. But when the king doesn't protect that protection, or doesn't protect us, our natural rights, we have the right to revolt. Boom, that's social contract. That's Hobbes. So again, you see that directly right in the reading there. All right, so today, we're going to focus on the Articles of Confederation, another very important document. So as you guys just did in the early part of class, we gained our independence. The Declaration, we fought a war, we gained our independence. Now what? Well, now you need to create a government of our own. But the Declaration didn't create a government, it was just declaring our rights. Okay, so we get our rights, we get our country, we get our freedom, but now you need to develop that bedrock of, okay, well, what is our government going to look like? Obviously, we didn't want the British model, so we create something called a confederation. Now, what does that mean, a confederation? A confederation is, we'll say, a loose alliance of states. So meaning that Ohio or West Virginia or Pennsylvania, we all agree to be aligned. So all the 13 colonies, they are agreeing to be aligned very loosely, but they each maintain their own sovereignty, so to speak. So it's a group of states united under a weak central government. So they agree, all those 13 colonies, they agree to have one central government, but it's going to be weak, meaning that the state governments will be strong. So the New York state government will basically be stronger than the national government. Um, so we'll talk more about that here in a minute, about why that might be a little bit, I don't know if that really is going to work. But I guess just play with me. We'll kind of play along. All right. So anyway, let's open the whole point of this unit, or this little lecture here, is going to be of the Articles of Confederation. All right. So life after the war, life after the American Revolutionary War against Great Britain. So during the American Revolutionary War, all 13 colonies had become separate states, and in turn, they had established their own laws and constitutions. So as I just said, 13 states, they agreed to be united, but each 13 state is going to be separate. They're going to have their own state constitutions, their own laws, their own money. Yes, they're going to have their own currency. So try to imagine that today, going to New York, and they have their own separate currency than what we have here in Ohio. They have their own separate laws that are very different from our own. But yet we're in the same country, so to speak, but we're all acting very, 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 very differently, each state. Think about how confusing that would be. Okay, well, that's how things were under our first government. So the people did not want to have a central government because they felt it would take away their power. They wanted power to belong to the states. Why? Because they were afraid how things were done in Great Britain. They were afraid of a strong national government. So they wanted each state to maintain their own power, their own sovereignty. So that's how things were done after the war. It was very, we were united, at least to an extent, but were very separated based upon what state you came from and what state had their own different things going on. All right, so the Articles of Confederation. You need to know this. This is like a big buzzword. By the end of this lecture, you should tell me, I know what the Articles of Confederation is. It is this. So here we go. Although the states didn't want a central government, they knew they needed to work together as a country. So the Continental Congress, they decided to create a plan for the first national government, which was called the Articles of Confederation. So what is the Articles? It is the first government of our country. It's a document that's going to outline our first national government. Pretty simple. You can pause this if you'd like, if you want to, take your time on this. All right, so some pros and cons of this. The Articles of Confederation left most of the power to the states and created a weak national government. This was ratified in March 1st, 1781. So again, we do have a national government, but it's very weak. They don't have a whole lot of power. Most power belongs to the states. Trying to think of an example that might be able to kind of help you out with this. I don't know. Maybe think of an example. Okay, let's say your parents leave for a couple hours and they go to the grocery store. They leave your brother or sister in charge to watch you. So yes, your brother or sister does have some power. They're watching you. They're babysitter, but ultimately your parents are the stronger entity. They are the rulers of your household. So think of it this way. Think of it as like your parents being the state and your brother or sisters watching you as the national government. Yes, they have your brother or sister have some power, but ultimately they're controlled by somebody else, by their parents. I guess that's just a way of looking at it, I guess. All right, so state power. So again, states were very powerful compared to the national government. So here's some jobs they were able to do. Each state had their own laws and their own constitution. So each Ohio, New York, whatever, they had their own laws, their own constitutions. Each state had their own different thing. Each state had their own army or militia. So there really wasn't a national army. Each state kind of did their own thing. So that's why it was important. Why did they need to be united loosely? Well, if New York was attacked, essentially all 13 were going to be attacked. So they all, theoretically should have been on the same page and been united. So that's why it's been very important for them to have some kind of a national system of government to make sure that to try to unite people. Taxation. The states have the power to tax its citizens. So keep that in mind here in a minute. Each state created their own separate court systems. Each state printed their own money. We talked about earlier how confusing that would be. Each state controlled their own trade, and each state sent representatives from each state to National Congress to meet every so often. And that's all state power. Here's the federal powers. Again, these powers are very limited, as you see in number 1, limited powers. The national government was able to declare war. They were able to make treaties with foreign governments. All right, sorry about that. I had to take a phone call really quick. So again, making treaties for power of the national government. They were able to settle disputes between states. So if states were arguing, quabbling about something, kind of this national government was seen as like the mediator that would resolve that. Now, here's the key word. They can request. Notice that's bolded and underlined. Request money from states. So again, remember, states have the power to tax. Federal government didn't have that power to tax. So think about the problems that the national government's going to have. If they ask for money, the states don't have to give it. So there's going to be some things that the national government is going to go bankrupt for. They need to raise money somehow for certain things to pay for certain costs. By the way, during the American Revolutionary War, when they fought against Great Britain, France lent them a lot of money. So after the war, France wants their money back. They want some money from their loan. And the national government is having a hard time paying that because they're not raising money from the states, and states aren't giving them, what they should be giving them. There's also number 6, raise an army, request troops from states. So going back to what I said before, national government didn't raise their own military. States did. They can request troops from states. So again, that was a problem. Some states weren't providing troops to the national government, or they didn't have to send troops. So again, although they were united, they also were very separate too, and that led to some problems for the national government. They, as you probably are reading through this, you could probably say, "Oh, yeah, that's definitely some issues, definitely some problems." All right. All right. So with some weaknesses, again, kind of reiterating a couple things here, some key points. And I did not cover this yet, so this is important. Under the Articles of Confederation, our first government, there was no executive, there was no president. All there was one branch of government, which was Congress. That's all there was. So think about why that would be a problem. Why would it be a problem there is no president? Best example I can give you, Thanksgiving in the Myers household. I got my mom, I got my sister, I got my wife, my grandma. They're all in the kitchen. 4 ladies that all very different ways of cooking things. They start arguing and bickering about ingredients and recipes. One makes this things one way, somebody else makes it this other way. They all start arguing, quabbling, and then, you know what, dinner is an hour late. All right, so there's too many cooks in the kitchen. That's the problem when you have no president. Think about, why do we have one head coach for a sport? Because you have one vision, one leader. Well, if you don't have that leader, if you had 4 head coaches, think about, if we're getting 4 different messages from 4 different people. Think about how confusing that would be. So that was the problem of the Articles. You had no leader, you had no president, you had Congress made up a bunch of men that were all arguing and quabbling over things that had different needs and wants. 2, national government cannot impose or collect taxes. I already talked about that. Federal government had a hard time raising money and paying off their debts to France. Big problem. 3, there was no national currency. Each state had their own printed off money. How confusing that would be. 4, there was no national court systems. Each state had their own courts. So again, how confusing that would be to handle like big key constitutional issues. Like right now, we have state courts, we have local courts here in our states, but we have national courts that deal with like federal laws. 5, no power to regulate trade in states. So again, that was a big problem amongst federal government that you couldn't regulate certain trades going on. 6, there was one vote per state regardless of size. So New York, which is huge, has the same amount of votes as Rhode Island. There were a lot of big states that were very populist that said that that's not fair. We're New York. We have 13 million people compared to Rhode Island, who has 500,000 people. We should get more say-so, more votes in Congress because we have more people. So that is some squabbling between states. 7, 2/3 of colonies needed to agree to pass a new law. 2/3. So again, you had states with very different ideas and ways of doing things. Especially think about the South. You had slaves going on in the South. North was more industrial. So you had 2 different viewpoints towards things in terms of business. And then 8, all 13 states needed to agree to change the Articles. Were all 13 states going to agree on things? No. So in order to pass things and get things done, it was very difficult to do. By how this was set up. All right, so you guys are gonna be watching something. It's called Shays Rebellion. You guys should have learned about this when you were in middle school. But ultimately, this is gonna bring and highlight a lot of the problems with the Articles and with Shays Rebellion. And this ultimately, Shays Rebellion is gonna lead to eventually we're going to get rid of the Articles and go to what we have now, which is the Constitution. So that'll be your assignment for tonight. So here's some things I kind of want you guys to kind of look at as you guys watch the movie. Who was Daniel Shay? What happened to him after the Revolutionary War? Why was this such a big deal for Daniel Shay and other farmers? What was Shay's Rebellion? What was his goal in doing this? After Shay's Rebellion, discuss the hardships that states and the federal government had, and how did Shay's Rebellion expose the problems of the Articles? All right. So anyway, that's it for today. Thank you.